Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Jay.
All right, so not a good outing for Bailey Ober last night. The Twins lose 10-6 to the Braves, first game of that series. Your thoughts?
Horrible night. They, they're coming off a bad loss on Sunday, and Ober gives them no chance. He had a long stretch of quality starts, and he blew the chance to have another quality start in the first four batters of the game. Just non-competitive outing, and it's been a strange year for him. He's generally been fantastic, and he's had about 3 or 4 outings where he just couldn't get anybody out and got hit like crazy. So either that's just kind of the way he works, and sometimes he can't get out of his own way in the first inning, or some hitters and some teams are able to pick up some clues on him and be able to kind of figure out what's coming. I don't know which it is. I've asked people in the Twins organization; they're not really sure, or they don't want to talk about it. But they really needed that. That was kind of for a guy who's bidding to be something of a top of the rotation starter and be considered, one of the best pitchers in the game. That was a moment where they kind of needed him, and he did not come through.
So, Jim, he doesn't have overpowering stuff, right?
Well, he doesn't have overpowering raw velocity, but when you factor in his height, his reach, his release point, if he throws 95, for a hitter, that probably looks like 98. So his stuff is more than good enough. He's not Nolan Ryan, but he has plenty between his effective velocity is very good.
So as far as offensively, Matt Wallner, boys, since he's come back, he gave him another home run last night. Kyle Farmer also hit a home run. He's been pretty good against left-handed pitching. Wallner's got 10 home runs now. Your thoughts on Wallner, how he turned it around?
He's been fantastic. He got into a funk. I always say one of the weirdest things about baseball is you can't try too hard, and he came in, he put a lot of pressure on himself this spring. He really wanted to be an impact player, wanted to establish himself, and he started diving into the plate. He stands open and then he steps toward the plate, and he can get away with stepping a little bit toward the plate, but he was diving into the plate, which left him vulnerable to almost any decent pitch, unless somebody threw a fastball on the outer half of the plate that he could reach out for. He just couldn't hit anything. So he had to go back to the minors, had to calm himself down a little bit, had to start stepping more toward the pitcher and less toward the plate, and that allowed him greater plate coverage, made him less vulnerable to inside pitches. And now he's doing, when he gets a fastball over the plate, he still smashes it, but he can also fight off other pitches or have a chance on other pitches. So completely, just kind of went back to what made him so successful last year. Kind of admirable too. I mean, with Royce Lewis being a little bit of a funk, Matt Wallner is by far their most productive hitter.
So, Jim, we saw Kansas City win both halves of the doubleheader against Cleveland yesterday. So now Cleveland leads the division by just a game over the Royals. Twins are now in third place, 2.5 games back of Cleveland. Your thoughts on this race?
It's crazy. And obviously the Twins have had had 4 bad losses in the last 8 games or whatever it's been. But, that's why you always got to go to the big picture. That's why you have to go to the math. They have 31 games left. They're 2.5 games out of the division lead. They're 5 games ahead of the team chasing them for the final wild card spot. They still have a 90% chance of making the playoffs. They still have games left for the Royals and Cleveland. So the results last week have been, again, the nature of these 4 losses has been horrific, but they're still in it. My greater concern is not this loss or that loss. My greater concern is health. Buxton has to go on a rehab assignment before they activate him. Correa still isn't on his way back yet. And he'll probably need a rehab assignment. Royce isn't swinging the bat very well. They're really depending on some young starters because of Joe Ryan's injury. They missed Brock Stewart. I mean, that's what really worries me more than any individual game results.
Jim, do you think it's possible that both the Twins and Royals could pass the Guardians?
Yeah. I feel like the Guardians have overachieved all year. If you look at, kind of the deep dive statistics, you would come to the conclusion that Cleveland's been very good, but also very lucky. They've won close games at an unsustainable rate, or what you would think would be an unsustainable rate. But I really think the race is a toss-up. But again, I go back to it. The Twins have to be healthier than this to win the division. Maybe they can make the playoffs just hanging in there with what they have. I think to win the division, they're going to have to get healthier, and I don't know if that's going to happen.
Jim, the Vikings announced the first round of cuts. I suppose those were the easier ones, and there'll be some tougher decisions that have to be made before 3 o'clock here this afternoon. Amongst the first rounders, we know that Mo Ibrahim, who the Vikings had just signed, now cut him loose. Would he be eligible for practice squad, and is that something you think that they'd consider for him?
Well, if they like him, yes, he'd be eligible for practice squad. I think they brought him in really for that reason, just to have an extra body in case they needed it during the last preseason game, also to take a look at him, see if he might be a practice squad candidate. Honestly, I don't know if they saw enough there to put him on the practice squad. We'll find that out here shortly. They also put Dalton Reisner on injured reserve. We were speculating he might get cut. This is a better result. He is a functional, NFL player. You'd like to keep him around if you can. Dwayne McBride, who I never thought was a very good player, didn't understand why they drafted him. They cut him. Other than that, pretty logical group of names already got cut.
Are there some names, bigger name guys that could get released today?
I wouldn't say, recognizable names. I wouldn't say big names. Our beat writers have speculated that Caleb Evans might be on the bubble. And he's shown some flashes, but does he really fit what Brian Flores wants to do? I don't really think Kwesi wants to cut him. He's another guy they drafted in 2022 in a draft that did not work out well, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But, it's a possibility. Other than that, you're talking about the last 3 or 4 spots on the roster. There aren't exactly big names down there.
Would they be looking to see who else might be cut to add players? Because that does happen with NFL teams as well.
Oh, sure. And that's why I don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about what they call the final roster, because the final roster isn't the final roster. They might pick up somebody on waivers. They might have 8 injuries the first week. The roster is going to be in constant flux. So, they very well could find a young cornerback or an offensive lineman or somebody like that out on waivers and decide to pick them up.
Jim, St. Cloud native, tech grad, former Gopher Brevin Spann-Ford has made the first round of cuts. Now we'll see if he can make the cut by 3 this afternoon. He was listed as 4th amongst tight ends. Are you aware of, has he done anything that would impress him enough where he could at least stick around as a practice squad guy for them?
I got to be honest. I have not paid much attention to him. I'd have to do some homework on that, and I just have not been paying a lot of attention to him. I like him as a prospect. It's hard to, the tight end position is so good these days. It's hard for somebody with his production level in college to make a big impact. Maybe he's on, I would expect at this point he's on the bubble, but I don't have any inside information on him.
Jim, would you say that if you're going to be a 3rd or 4th string tight end, you're probably going to be expected to play special teams?
Probably, yes. Yes, you would definitely. And he also probably better be able to block. You're probably going to be a special teamer who comes in on, big man packages. So, I like his hands. I like his size. I would like to think that he has a future catching passes in the NFL, but if you make it as a 3rd or 4th tight end, you better be able to do the other things.
Jim, Gopher football is going to start their season on Thursday night at home against North Carolina. Is this the type, and they don't have Drake May anymore. North Carolina doesn't, and that was certainly made it for a challenge, especially for the Gopher defense. Your thoughts on, what is North Carolina a similar team? Are they going to be a beatable team for the Gophers Thursday?
The Gophers are favored, I think, by 1.5 in the place I looked it up, which when a home team's favored by less than 3, you're saying it's really a pure toss-up. Usually the home team gets a 3 or 4 point bump for being at home. So it's a pretty even matchup. 2 pretty mysterious teams. We don't know what North Carolina is going to look without Drake May. I think they don't have their top receiver anymore. They do have a good running back. The Gophers' defensive strength should be in their front 7. So whether North Carolina can run the ball or not is probably going to be a big factor in this. North Carolina supposedly has a decent defense, and we just don't know what Brosmer is going to look like as a quarterback. We also don't know whether Taylor's going to be healthy or not. So much mystery out there. I don't have any idea how to predict this game. I think it'll be really, but I do think with the difficulty of the future schedule, if they want to have any aspirations of making a bowl game, they would probably need to win this game.
Jim, how about Jackson, the receiver? Is he going to be available to play? Have we heard anything on him?
No, and Fleck really has basically said he's not going to announce anything until right before the game, so we just don't know.
The Minnesota Lynx next game is going to be at Phoenix. They've already clinched a playoff spot. Is there an advantage to move up from 3 to 2?
Yeah, it just guarantees you a home playoff game in the second round, no matter what happens, and that could be a big deal. It's a short playoff series, so yeah, and for all the normal seeding reasons, you'd rather be 2 than 3. If you end up playing Connecticut, that could be a difference maker. You're playing against. Phoenix isn't the greatest team, but you're still playing against Taurasi, who's spicy. You still have to deal with Griner, who is much bigger than anybody the Lynx have. It's not an easy matchup.
What do you think about the big contract for CeeDee Lamb with the Cowboys?
I think we all knew this was coming. It's just going to be a matter of dominoes. Jefferson was probably going to go first, and then CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase were going to try to piggyback off him. I just feel like everybody thought the CeeDee Lamb deal would get done. It just took a little longer than expected. Now Jamar Chase is a more interesting case because he obviously wants to get the biggest contract, but he's still got 2 years left on his contract. So he's a little dicier situation than the rest. It's harder for him to have an effective holdout when he's got 2 years left on his contract, but he's holding in. He hasn't complained publicly, but that's a big deal because if Chase plays well this year, Cincinnati could go right back to being a Super Bowl contender.
Jim, is it the Eagles and 49ers as the clear favorites in the NFC?
I guess so. The Ayuk holdout and the Trent Williams holdouts give me concern for the 49ers. The Eagles have a lot to prove. They were really a mess last year, and they kind of admitted they were a mess internally last year. I certainly like the Saquon Barkley signing. But they still have a lot to prove. I could see the Lions being really good. I could see the. I don't know. I guess by default, the Eagles and the 49ers have to be considered at the top of the league, but I don't think it's a solid hold. I think both teams have a lot to prove because of their other situations.
All right, Jim, what do you got in your podcast?
Full slate's up at talknorth.com, including Chin Music, the Roy Smalley, Lavelle Deal, and myself. We just did a Dawn of Sports that'll be out tomorrow morning. Tonight we'll be doing the John Krasinski Show, the Viking Update Show, and John Millay's new show with Randy Shaver on high school football that's doing very well. You can watch it on YouTube as well as listen to it at talknorth.com.
All right, very good. Thank you, Jim. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Jay.
It's Jim Souhan, Star Tribune sports columnist, joining us every weekday morning at this time. Follow him on Twitter at SouhanStrib. Check out his latest column at Star Tribune or his podcast at TalkNorth.com. Jim, once again, today is brought to you by the Green Mill in downtown St. Cloud. Dream Getaway 80. Your first code word of the day is dog. Yesterday was National Dog Day. D-O-G. Dog. That is the first code word of the day for Dream Getaway 80. Dog. D-O-G. Thanks to our sponsors. Burst Travel, SB Restoration and Scotty's Exteriors, Burnix, really cool living furniture store, and professional mechanical services. First code word of the day is dog. News from ABC next.